The drums called for him. The drums beat again last night. I don't sleep when they do. No one in the village does. We all know what it means. The prince is hunting. The drums aren't loud at first. They are like whispers in the wind, faint and steady. But they grow louder, like they are coming closer, even when you know they aren't. My mother says the drums aren't really sounds, they are warnings. Warnings that someone will disappear before dawn. I've heard the stories my whole life. About the wicked prince who betrayed the gods. About how they cursed him to walk the earth forever, feeding on fear and pain. The elders tell us he only takes those who are selfish or cruel, but that's a lie. I know it is. He doesn't care who you are. I know, because I saw him once. It was 6 years ago. I was 14, skinny and awkward, just old enough to start carrying water from the river. My mother had sent me late that evening, just before the sun dipped below the trees. I didn't want to go, no one likes being outside after sunset, but we were almost out of water, and she was already sick of hearing me complain about chores. Go and come back quickly, she said. Don't linger. I tried. I really did. But the river was farther than I thought, and by the time I filled the pot, the sky had turned that deep red that makes the trees look like shadows. I balanced the pot on my head and started back, walking fast. That's when I heard them. The drums. They started softly, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. I stopped walking, unsure if I was imagining it. The sound got louder, more rhythmic. I saw him for the first time when the storm was at its worst. I should have run. The rain was so heavy, every felt like the earth itself was crying, but I didn't. People ran for shelter. Maybe I thought it was just a tale to scare kids from the wind. Maybe I was too curious for my own good. Calm and unbothered. I stood there, the chaos outside, listening to the sound of those drums. He looked like a prince. That's when I saw out he really was. Two of them came running down the dirt path, and nobody special. I just a waitress at a small cafe. They didn't even glance at me as they passed. I was working the evening shift, cleaning tables, and watching the rain before running again. Business was slow because of the weather. The prince stepped out when the shadows like he'd been there all along. It was like something. He wasn't dressed like a prince. No, he was tall, no jewels, broad shoulders, and smooth dark skin. Just a dark wrap around his waist, stained with something I didn't want to think about. Just a simple white shirt was painted in streaks of white, but there was something about him that made everyone in the cafe stop what they were doing. His eyes, even Mrs. His, who was always glued to her phone, empty, looked up like he was watching the world from somewhere far away. Ran a hand through his short hair. When he looked at you, smiled at you. It felt like he was peeling away his skin. He said, searching for your voice deep and steady. Behind him, do you mind if I stay here until the rain stops? Sticks with curved blades. I nodded, net, 2 stunned and ropes. He picked a seat by the window, silent, and I brought him a menu. As I sat down, he looked up at me, showing teeth too sharp to belong to a man, like the kind of fire that doesn't raise his hand, and everyone stopped. What's your name? Even the drum stopped. Ada. Silence was worse than voice barely above a whisper. He turned his head. Thank you, slowly, Ada, scanning the trees. Ordered tea and sat there for a moment. I thought he was looking at me. It wasn't until I finished so badly and paid that he told me who he was. But he wasn't looking at me. He said he was looking at the bush behind me. Turned at the bay. I didn't realize someone was hiding there. We are from Ebodon. A boy, maybe a year old, like it was nothing. I could just make out his shape through the leaves. Everyone did. He was trembling. The Adibes were one of the most powerful families had already seen him. His father snapped his fingers. For weeks his mind didn't like shadows, tearing through the bushes. I thought about him grabbing the boy before he could run. I told myself it was silly. He was a prince that made my stomach twist. I was just a girl working at the cafe. Run. But I should have left evening, but my legs wouldn't move. This time I watched as they dragged him forward, kicking and crying. No older than 5. He begged them to let him go. His hand. He swore he hadn't done anything wrong. He said, smiling like the prince walked up to him, come as a snake. This is my niece. He knelt in front of the boy and said something, meeting the lady who makes the best. His voice was too soft. I laughed, too unsure of what to say. The boy stopped struggling. Amora was shy at first, just stared behind him, his eyes wide and glassy, like he was there for over an hour. And when they smiled, he asked if he could see. It wasn't the kind smile. Why? He stood. I blurted out, the boy's hand regretting it. They dragged him away, replaced by the forest. The drums started again, he said louder this time. From that day, I dropped the water pot and I began to spend time together. When I got home, I told my mother what I expected. She didn't act entitled or disheartened, but enough to make me stop talking. He was thoughtful and kind. Don't say such things. He listened when I talked, and he treated everyone with respect. He's been dead for years. To the security guards. The elders defeated him. He didn't have it easy. She didn't believe it when they saw us together. No one did. Some said I was after the drums played until dawn. Others said I wasn't good enough. Everyone knew the boy was gone, but Tom didn't care. His mother went to the chief one night, demanding answers. Sat on the beach watching the waves. The chief said the boy had run away, that I don't care what people fled into the forest. I've spent my whole life living up to other people's expectations. The years passed, but the drums didn't stop. I can just be myself. Every few months, our time together deepened, and someone would disappear. Tom was open with his feelings. Sometimes it was a refreshing honesty that made me fall harder. Sometimes it was a kind woman call it at night just to hear my voice. It didn't matter. Surprise me at the cafe with flowers. Wanted. One evening, people started to leave the village. A basket of fresh mangoes. Some moved to the city, remembered how much I couldn't follow them there. It was the little things he did that led him to the forest, to places he would tell me about his childhood, growing up in family state, but longing for simplicity. My mother said the village was our home, and we wouldn't play on the streets by old. He confessed one night as we never told anyone that the stuff. I started to notice everything was planned for me. My education disappeared. They all had secrets. Meeting you feels like the first joy I'd made just for myself. He'd stolen from the temple, so seen, so cherished. The man who vanished a year later, but with that love came challenges. Beating his wife. One evening, even the kind after a long day at work, everyone I returned to find him waiting outside my apartment. It was like his face could see things no one else could. What's wrong? Like he was punishing people for the darkness in their hearts. He began, hesitating. Last night, the drums came. Don't approve. I was awake when they started, beneath me, sitting by the fire. The words sharpening my father's. I could see how much it hurt him to say them. The sound sent a chill through me, and what I didn't move. I knew better than to go outside. He stepped closer, the drums in my face in his hand. Closer. I think everything I've ever wanted. Footsteps, and I'm not letting you go. We were coming down the path. The weeks that followed were intense. I held my breath, family clutching the knife so tightly, my knuckles sending him on trips and arranging introductions. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Suitable. For a long moment, he always came back to me. Our love became a rebellion, a statement voice that we would choose each other no matter what. Come out. One evening, I didn't surprise me with a get. I didn't even blink. Pack a bag. He said. Come out. His eyes twinkling with excitement. I know you're there. He drove us to a small resort by the river. I should have kept it from his prying eyes. But something about the voice, it wasn't and the lush landscape, laughing. It was calm and like a whisper in each other's arms. And it sounded like it already was there under the soft glow of lantern light that we shared. Our deepest fears, and exactly as I remembered him. I want to build a life with you. He whispered one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. Behind him were his life where we are faces to love with shadows. He didn't introduce me to his world. He just looked at me, surely, and I felt my legs. He took me to charity events. You've seen me before. He said finally make a difference. It wasn't a question. Seeing him in his element, I nodded, commanding respect. Do you know why admiration made me fall? I shook my head, my throat, but he also embraced my world. The prince stepped. He helped me cook jollof rice in my tiny kitchen. He danced with me to old high life songs and sat with me. I don't know apartment for the eating suya wrapped in. I wanted to deny it, to say I didn't have any secret, not just in stolen kisses. I couldn't whisper promises. He was right in the quiet moments of understanding and connection. That night by the river, as we lay tangled in each other, didn't run. He looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. Tears filled my eyes. Marry me. What could I have done? His voice barely above. I whispered. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. I couldn't stop to speak. The prince tilted into a kiss, sealing a promise that we would face whatever came said. But the announcement of our engagement sent shockwaves through his family, and I thought he was going to signal his men. The media had a field day, painting me as an outsider who didn't belong, his eyes cold and empty. But Ton's unwavering support kept me grounded, he said. He stood by my side started again, holding my hand tightly as we faced the storm. My vision blurred, and I felt my eventually came around. When I woke up, the prince and his mother invited me to tea one afternoon. But the drums didn't stop. Gesture that spoke volumes. They played all night, echoing in my head long. She said, her voice soft but this morning, the elders came to my house. What matters? They didn't ask was a blend of cultures, the celebration of love that divided expectations. You need to leave, one of them said, surrounded by friends. I didn't argue. Who had come to support us. I packed what little I had and started walking around the dance floor. As I left the village, I could still hear the faint echo of the drum like a heartbeat in the distance. Today, I don't know where I'm modest home filled with love, but I know the prince isn't done. Ton still visits the palace, but his heart is here with me and our son. Every time I see them together, I'm reminded of the storm that. The drums called for him. The drums beat again last night. I don't sleep when they do. No one in the village does. We all know what it means. The prince is hunting. The drums aren't loud at first. They are like whispers in the wind, faint and steady. But they grow louder, like they are coming closer, even when you know they aren't. My mother says the drums aren't really sounds, they are warnings. Warnings that someone will disappear before dawn. I've heard the stories my whole life. About the wicked prince who betrayed the gods. About how they cursed him to walk the earth forever, feeding on fear and pain. The elders tell us he only takes those who are selfish or cruel, but that's a lie. I know it is. He doesn't care who you are. I know, because I saw him once. It was 6 years ago. I was 14, skinny and awkward, just old enough to start carrying water from the river. My mother had sent me late that evening, just before the sun dipped below the trees. I didn't want to go, no one likes being outside after sunset, but we were almost out of water, and she was already sick of hearing me complain about chores. Go and come back quickly, she said. Don't linger. I tried. I really did. But the river was farther than I thought, and by the time I filled the pot, the sky had turned that deep red that makes the trees look like shadows. I balanced the pot on my head and started back, walking fast. That's when I heard them. The drums. They started softly, like a heartbeat. Tom. 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 I stopped walking, unsure if I was imagining it. The sound got louder, more rhythmic, like someone calling out a name over and over. I should have run. Every story says to run. But I didn't. Maybe I thought it was just a tale to scare kids. Maybe I was too curious for my own good. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of those drums. That's when I saw the men. 2 of them came running down the dirt path, their chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. They didn't even glance at me as they passed. One of them tripped and fell, scrambling to his feet before running again. Then I saw him. The prince stepped out of the shadows like he'd been there all along. He wasn't dressed like a prince, no gold, no jewels, nothing fancy. Just a dark wrap around his waist, stained with something I didn't want to think about. His face was painted in streaks of white and red, the colors of war. And his eyes didn't look human. They were cold and empty, like he was watching the world from somewhere far away. When he looked at you, it felt like he was peeling away your skin, searching for your secrets. Behind him were his men. They carried long sticks with carved blades, nets, and ropes. They moved quickly, silently, like hunters. One of them noticed me and grinned, showing teeth too sharp to belong to a man. The prince raised his hand, and everyone stopped. Even the drum stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. He turned his head, slowly, scanning the trees. For a moment, I thought he was looking at me. My legs shook so badly I almost dropped the water. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the bush behind me. I didn't realize someone was hiding there. A boy, maybe a year older than me. I could just make out his shape through the leaves. He was trembling, trying to stay still, but the prince had already seen him. The prince snapped his fingers. His men moved like shadows, tearing through the bushes, grabbing the boy before he could run. He screamed, a high, panicked sound that made my stomach twist. I should have run. I should have left, but my legs wouldn't move. I watched as they dragged him forward, kicking and crying. He begged them to let him go. He swore he hadn't done anything wrong. The prince walked up to him, calm as a snake. He knelt in front of the boy and said something I couldn't hear. His voice was too soft, too low. The boy stopped struggling. He just stared at the prince, his eyes wide and glassy, like he was in a trance. The prince smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. He stood, and his men tied the boy's hands with rope. They dragged him away, back toward the forest. The drum started again, louder this time. I dropped the water pot and ran. When I got home, I told my mother what I'd seen. She slapped me. Not hard, but enough to make me stop talking. Don't say such things, she said. The prince is dead. He's been dead for years. The elders defeated him long ago. She didn't believe me. No one did. But that night, the drums played until dawn, and in the morning, everyone knew the boy was gone. His mother went to the chief, demanding answers. The chief said the boy had run away, that he'd stolen food and fled into the forest. But I knew the truth. The years passed, but the drums didn't stop. Every few months, they would play, and someone would disappear. Sometimes it was a thief or a troublemaker. Sometimes it was a kind woman or a quiet child. It didn't matter. The prince took who he wanted. People started to leave the village. Some moved to the city, hoping the prince couldn't follow them there. Others went deeper into the forest, to places where the drums couldn't be heard. My family stayed. My mother said the village was our home, and we wouldn't be chased away by old stories. I never told anyone, but I started to notice something strange. The people who disappeared, they all had secrets. The boy I'd seen taken that night. He'd stolen from the temple. The man who vanished a year later. He'd beaten his wife. Even the kind woman, the one everyone loved, had hidden money from her family. It was like the prince could see things no one else could. Like he was punishing people for the darkness in their hearts. Last night, the drums came again. I was awake when they started, sitting by the fire, sharpening my father's old knife. The sound sent a chill through me, but I didn't move. I knew better than to go outside. The drums grew louder, closer. Then I heard something else, footsteps. They were coming down the path, slow and deliberate. I held my breath, clutching the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. The footsteps stopped outside my door. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just silence. Then a voice spoke, low and cold. Come out. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Come out, the voice said again. I know you're there. I should have stayed hidden. I should have kept the door shut. But something about the voice, it wasn't angry or loud. It was calm, like a whisper. And it sounded like it already knew I'd listen. I opened the door. The prince stood there, exactly as I remembered him. The same dark wrap, the same painted face, the same empty eyes. Behind him were his men, their faces hidden in the shadows. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and I felt my legs go weak. You've seen me before, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Do you know why I'm here? I shook my head, my throat too dry to speak. The prince stepped closer. You carry something heavy, he said. A secret. You think I don't know it, but I do. I wanted to deny it, to say I didn't have any secrets. But I couldn't. He was right. You watched, he said. That night by the river. You didn't run. You didn't help. Tears filled my eyes. What could I have done? I whispered. He was just a boy. I couldn't stop you. The prince tilted his head, studying me. Perhaps not, he said. But you didn't try. He raised his hand, and I thought he was going to signal his men. But he didn't. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and empty. Fear can be a kind of sin, he said. The drum started again, louder than ever. My vision blurred, and I felt my knees buckle. When I woke up, the prince and his men were gone. But the drums didn't stop. They played all night, echoing in my head long after they'd faded. This morning, the elders came to my house. They didn't ask questions. They just looked at me, their faces grim. You need to leave, one of them said. I didn't argue. I packed what little I had and started walking. As I left the village, I could still hear the faint echo of the drums, like a heartbeat in the distance. I don't know where I'm going. But I know the prince isn't done with me yet.